Good afternoon, everybody. Another one of our impromptu videos to be put up on the Unfiltered Historian page. I'm Tyler, and this is
Tim.
So we are here today at the Vermont Monument at the Wilderness Battlefield in Spotsylvania County, and could technically be considered Orange County depending on who you ask, but we're going to call it Spotsy for the day. Tim, what brings us to the Vermont Monument? What are we doing here?
Well, it's hot today. And
It's hot.
Wilderness, shade, seemed like a good place to go if we wanted to do some history for you folks. So
We're going to bring you to the Vermont Monument. Now, if anyone knows anything about the Battle of the Wilderness, we know that in May of 1864, Ulysses S. Grant is going to bring his Union Army, we call it the Army of the Potomac for those that know it, but now he's making his headquarters with the Army of the Potomac, and he's going to bring them into this part of Virginia, crossing the Rapid and crossing the Rappahannock. And he is itching for a fight with Robert E. Lee. The monument behind us depicts Lewis A. Grant's Vermonters. Those Vermonters are going to fight here and take some extreme casualties. Do you know the number upwards of what they take, Tim?
In excess of 1,200, actually.
1,200 casualties. The only place we're seeing something similar was when we went to Petersburg and we saw the Maine artillerists that were infantrymen, right?
Right, and so they actually had to rush. They hadn't gone far that day, but when word came that Heath's division was coming down the Orange Plank Road to seize the Brock Road, which they quickly identified was key terrain here because it would separate various elements. Hancock's corps is actually already down this way, so they rush, basically a forced march, barely beat Heath, and then push him back, and the Vermonters end up off in this direction, closer to Tapfield, past where their monument is today. So really heavy fighting. They're getting hit from multiple sides, and in this area very quickly just starts, as is often the case with actions like this, the wheat field.
The wheat field. We were just there.
This action just starts sucking in troops.
So almost like a whirlpool, if you will.
Yeah, like
okay.
a whirlpool. And the same thing's actually happening on the north end of the battlefield at Saunders Field. Basically, that one sucks in the entire 5th Corps pretty much. Good chunk of the 6th Corps later in the afternoon into the next day. And this area sucks in that 6th Corps division that has Grant and the Vermont Brigade, and then the 2nd Corps. And then Burnside kind of fills in the middle.
Old Burnside. Now, do you see this here? Am I the only one seeing that road there? That's not the unfinished railroad, is it?
No, I don't think that.
I think that's farther back down that way.
The unfinished railroad's back in that direction.
So I must admit I'm not the most well-versed in the wilderness, so I'm actually learning quite a bit from Tim out here, and that's partially the reason we're doing this video here. We're just trying to really kind of walk today and talk. We're not really necessarily coming at you with another agenda. This is why the video is going to be known as Unfiltered Wilderness. As I go along with Tim, and I'm sure this is going to be one of many. I don't think this is going to be our only time out in the wilderness. But I want to learn, and I think a good way to do it is having you guys learn with me, and have Tim helping us kind of learn and navigate this battlefield, because he's very knowledgeable at these places.
Well, you taught me something, so tell them about the great myth that's not really a myth about the trees and the thickness of the wilderness.
I came off reading Petty's book about the wilderness, and I know a lot of people aren't necessarily fond of it, or maybe have it on the top of their shelf, and some people may even go out of their way to talk bad on it. But I like to look at it in consideration. Being someone who is from this area their whole life, you know, I know a little bit about the history of Spotswood. I know a little bit about the furnace industry, so it was something that I found very interesting when he writes that the wilderness wasn't necessarily the second growth forest that we all know it as. We see these skimpy little trees like this one back here, and they're saying that this is what it's littering the battlefield.
But
thicker, right. And in reality, this is pine tree right here is more of what we're looking at in more of a dense location. And I think one of the things he attributes that really stuck to me was, he's like, well, who was really doing a mining industry? Who was really having those furnaces burning, other than the very famous Catherine's furnace that's only reinstated because the Confederate Army has a contract with it in order for it to help produce pig iron for the Confederate war effort. And you're not seeing these booming industries out in the field anymore, and let alone, Spotswood's been dead almost 100 years at this point. Not quite, but almost. So we're looking at how quick these trees grow, and especially a Virginia pine, they shoot up out of the ground rather fast. So my takeaway from that was that there were many mature trees, I think, here, more so than we are giving it credit for. We think...
So the terrain wasn't uniform
No.
all across the 70 square miles that you say is actually
Right.
bigger.
Yeah, they think it's actually bigger, and to me that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the conclusions that I'm drawing from this is, okay, we look at Saunders Field, that's a clearing, right? And the trees around it are where we're getting the descriptions of those dense, thick forests, and those are where all these and really intense fights. Now, I'm not discrediting any of the fights here, because these are hellish in their own right, but it makes a valid point. It's like, okay, well, why are we looking at different types of, scenarios where we have a huge clump of trees and skimpy trees over at Saunders and maybe Widow Tap, but over here where there's not necessarily a clearing, there's some more mature trees, and that's because, an iron furnace isn't going to mine an entire, what is estimated to be 120 square feet of wilderness. Miles, sorry, square feet, that's a tiny little thing there. My apartment's bigger than that, shoot. But, we're not looking at 120 square miles worth of deforestation in the iron industry. I don't even think there's that many iron furnaces to produce 120 square miles worth of deforestation. So it's an interesting takeaway, and let alone we look at Chickamauga in 1863, looking kind of similar to what this side of the Plank Road would have replicated, and that's also highlighted in that book. So I do highly recommend, if you get a chance, to read the Wilderness and Myth and Memory by Petty. It is a fantastic book. It does kind of shatter some myths, and if you're not open to new interpretation and don't have that open mind to go into it, I do not recommend it, because you might hate it. But if you really want to go in and kind of get a feel for it and maybe challenge the traditional interpretation, which is something I love to do, and I get a lot of crap for it, but that's okay. That's what I'm here to do. I think it's fantastic, and it changed the way I perceive the Battle of the Wilderness from the knowledge that I do know about the wilderness.
Well, let's just think about this from another angle. Even today, when they cut a new road or do road widening, very quickly you see the dense growth along the sides of the road. Any road, just go drive.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Pick one. But then further in, it's a little bit more open. So that might explain, they're not going to just go into the middle of somewhere, because then
Right.
they have to haul out the tree. It's kind of like when you're hunting, you don't want to go like a million miles out and have to drag the animal all the way back
That's
through.
a heavy drag,
Just giving an example. You're not going to want to drag a tree and then you have to worry about the tree smacking into other trees. So you're going to start at the edges and work in. So by default, I mean, that's just logically further away from the road, it's going to open up. And where are they fighting? Most of these troops, like you said, we found out the sharpshooters, 2nd U.S. are off in this direction.
Right, I didn't even know that. That was a discovery for me today. Like I said, I'm lacking in this battle.
So, but even
that's
then,
exciting.
from a military standpoint, we talk about how hard it is to move through a wilderness. Now, it's hard enough to move through here. They don't specify what kind of forest. They're saying it's thick. But what does thick mean? Does thick mean this? Because right now, Vermont Monument, we can't see much further than the monument right now. But that's only less than it's about 100 yards.
Yeah,
maybe
just
a little
about.
less.
And it's
But
still almost not visible.
We can't really see it from here.
Y'all can't see it. Look, and you're pointing right at it. You can't see it from here, and so you're looking at it at a camera's angle too. They didn't have a camera to look at, obviously, but even if you can't see it here, even us, we're having a hard time.
The area where the path is, it's low, you can't see. Someone could conceivably get closer here.
Yeah.
Now, they're not going in these vivid descriptions. They say they say thick, if I'm mistaken. They say dense underbrush.
Dense, yeah.
But
who's to say that's not dense? Like, let's get him a look at that. That's dense. I mean, that's replicative of Culpsilla you and I saw the other day.
Now, maybe the wilderness actually looked more like that. You have some mature trees, but you also have a lot of undergrowth where the sun's shining through, because that's
Try to get you guys a better look.
Like, if you read about the wilderness, they talk about, and they go into like the environmental history of it, they'll talk about how it's dense undergrowth because mature trees keep the ground shaded and the undergrowth doesn't grow up like this area behind us right here.
Right.
It's more like that. So personally, I think there is a lot of merit to that, where you have more undergrowth, but you also have a good section of mature trees. Not quite that area like around the Chancellorsville Visitor Center or the Tap Field, where you can't even walk in there.
Right, I mean, and that's created for interpretation too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Realistically, what are you going to do if you're trying to maneuver forces through that? At some point, you just can't do it.
Around.
You can't maneuver through it. You're fighting exclusively on roads, but we know that they're not. So that lends to the argument. Now, we may be off.
Oh, absolutely.
But that makes sense.
I think we're making not a hypothesis, but I think this is how historians, debate things. This is what you do. You challenge something that you can find, sources on that dispute the traditional interpretation. And I don't do this to just, oh, I think it's wrong, so I'm going to be wrong. I'm not doing that to be, and I'm going to say, I'm not being an asshole here. I'm trying to literally, okay, it doesn't make sense the way it's been written. It doesn't make sense to me how some of these battles take place and happen, and some of the things that happen in these battles, and that they're taught this, this traditional way for 150 years, and then somebody comes along and actually brings some worthwhile material and sources forward. A lot of people reject it because they're so used to learning a certain aspect of that battle, or it holds a certain memory to them, or even just the narrative of the story changes, it screws the whole battle for them, so they dismiss it.
I also think there is a perception that if someone's come out with a new interpretation, they're just grasping at straws to come up with something new, because you really don't advance the scholarship unless you come up with something new.
Exactly.
So I understand skepticism that is wary of new for the sake of being new. But that being said, when there are sources, you can't just chuck it.
No.
You can't. You can argue against it. You can say, I understand where he's going with this, but for this reason and this reason and this reason. And I think there is a little bit too much nastiness out there at times where you can't, where people view disagreements or disputes with people's interpretations as personal attacks, when that isn't what it is at all.
Heard. Well, I think that was a good stopping point for now. I'm going to post this video to the Unfiltered Historian, so if you're watching it, that's where you're watching it. If not, you may be watching on my personal page, but if you're watching it on the Unfiltered Historian page, we want to thank you. If you're watching on my page, thank you too. If you're watching it on Tim's page, thank you. But thank you guys for supporting the Unfiltered Historian. As you probably saw earlier, we have reached 10.4K reachings to different places around the world, which is unfathomable, I think, to all of us here, and it wouldn't be possible without you guys and our wonderful team here at Unfiltered Historian. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit this video, and on our walk back to the truck, I'm going to try to boost us one more live video because I want to see you guys live. So hey, have a wonderful day. If we don't see you again this week, we will see you again probably the next, or the day after, or the day after. We do live videos all the time, so just when you see the notification, click it.
Take care.
Take care.